Okay, we're in Mounce BBG chapter 13, and we're going to be doing sentence number 3. Sentence number 3 is a very interesting one, and it's one that could easily trip you up. So it's one you really got to kind of pay attention to all the detail. First of all, you see the A in the beginning of the sentence, and you might tend to think that that has something to do with a me, but it would have a circumflex over the iota if it had to do with a me. So here we're talking about the if. We're talking about it simply being if. And then, and again, what I tend to do is say, let's break up the sentence into parts. And this technically is the first part. The comma kind of splits it up for you in this particular sentence. So we're going to treat this first part. And next thing we do is come to tau-ta. You might look at that alpha ending, and if you didn't know any better, you might think that that was a feminine ending. But you do need to remember that that can also, an alpha ending can also be a neuter plural, either nominative or accusative. So going on that assumption, and by the way, you'd be correct if you assume that. Going on that assumption, then you move on and you say, okay, well, you already gave us the verb with you know. Well, you're trying to think about, is this nominative or accusative? Well, it can't be nominative because the verb is actually second person singular, or I'm sorry, second person plural, which would make the make you have the necessity of the subject being a you, a plural you, and that's not what you have here. So it clearly tau-ta cannot be the subject. What that means to you is, since it can't be the subject because it can't agree with the verb, is that it must be the object, which makes it accusative. So since you have a demonstrative pronoun, you know therefore that it is neuter, that it's plural, that it's accusative, and that it's the direct object, therefore. So then what you're going to do is you're going to go, if you know these. Well, when you have a situation like that, you really got to add that extra noun in there to say, like, what are we talking about gender-wise? Simply for clarification, because are we talking about if you know these women, if you know these men, if you know these things? Well, in this case, since it's neuter, it really is important to spell it out and say, if you know these things. So that's going to be your first clause, is if you know these things. Then you got the second clause, makarioi. You got the, clearly a masculine nominative plural, all right? And then you have you are. So the problem, oops, sorry about that. The problem that you've got is you got this, again, second person plural verb with este, and then you got to say, well, wait a minute, does this agree? No, it doesn't agree. So even though this has a nominative plural ending, it's not the subject. So because it doesn't agree with the verb, because you know that the verb is a second person plural. So you'd have to have a y'all or you all in order to have an appropriate subject. So what you got to do is you got to recognize, well, if you have you all or y'all are, and of course as a southerner I would want to go with y'all, but y'all are, and then of course makarii is blessed. So what you're going to do with that is you're going to say, well, that's basically, it's a predicate adjective. And the reason that it's in the nominative case is because it has to agree in case number gender with the subject, and the subject is y'all, and so makarioi is simply agreeing with y'all, even though there's no specific subject spelled out. So again, you're going to go, y'all are blessed for that particular chunk. All right, and hopefully everybody gets that even though this looks like a subject, because it doesn't agree with the verb in terms of person and number, it has to be the predicate. But that's okay, because what you have is you have if it were a noun, it would be a predicate nominative. But in this case, you have an adjective, so it's going to be a predicate adjective. So again, y'all are blessed, or you all are blessed. And then you have aeon, which is if, again. And then you got you do. And then you have auta, which you notice you have the same kind of thing going on. You have this alpha ending, and you say, well, what does that tell me? I didn't know any better. I might think it was feminine, but again, you're going to think, really what you need to think is, okay, probably neuter, probably plural, probably either nominative or accusative. So if I'm trying to figure out nominative or accusative, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the verb and say, well, wait a minute. The verb is, second person plural, which means the subject would have to be you all, and that is clearly not this as far as autos is concerned. And of course, this being from autos. Clearly not the case, which means this is, again, has to be the object, has to be the direct object. It's got to be accusative. And again, in the clause, you're going to say blessed. You all or y'all are blessed if you do, and in this case, them, because essentially it's going to point back to the tauta in the beginning. But could you say the things? Well, yeah, but you're really trying to translate the pronoun. So in this particular case, better to just go with them and recognize that the antecedent is tauta. Okay, and that lines up as well as far as that neuter plural inflection. So once again, if you know these things, y'all are blessed if you do them.